That's a hard one. But Jesus talks in parables for a reason. Parable is allegory. So I got all schoolish, and I have definitions for you. A story, a poem, or a picture that can be interpreted to reveal a hidden meaning, typically a moral or political one. An allegory is a story within a story. It has a surface story and another story hidden underneath. The surface story might be about two neighbors throwing rocks at each other's houses, but the hidden story would be about war between countries. A parable uses allegory as a narrative story to convey an abstract, complex, or dangerous message. Allegory works by giving characters and events in the story symbolic meanings. As readers, our attention remains on the surface story while a symbolic story plays out underneath. I can see that in the gospel. How do you invite people and then invite more people and then kick people out? What? This is the parable of the wedding feast, or it's the parable of the wedding robe. The top of this story is a call to those who have been invited, first the Jews and later the Gentiles. Those unwilling to come, they're seen as a rejection of the gospel itself. Everything is ready. Why aren't you here? Come on, come on. So the king sent out his slaves to invite people to the feast, and they get killed. I don't like this story. Because this is a parable, it is a story. We get to interpret some examples of slaves to God. John the Baptist, they thought he was crazy. Other apostles, they thought we're drunk at 9 o'clock in the morning. Moses, taking too long. I need another God. Give me your earrings, give me your ears, give me stuff. I need a calf. That's where I'm going to pray. Paul is in prison most of the time he's writing. And any of us who are taking the gospel to people who refuse to hear or understand what's being said. And the king is enraged. So he sends troops. You don't like my slaves? Take this. And he murders the murderers. I don't like this story. That's a great way to make sure nobody accepts the invitation. My favorite word in the Bible. But. We think we know what's going to happen, but we see people finally show up to this party. But the king looks at the guest and says, "Friend, how did you get in here? You don't have a robe." Parable, allegory. The host of the party, after all the trouble to get people in here, the king himself kicks somebody out. And that just doesn't make sense to me. Until we remember that it's allegory. This is the sub-story of the sub-story. Yes. The parable of the wedding feast is a parable about universalism. Jesus teaches that the kingdom of God is open to everyone now, not just the Jews. So this fuss about a wedding garment, seen through allegory, is actually about salvation, by grace, through faith, which is bought and paid for by Jesus himself. The sub-story then is of someone to whom the wedding garment of salvation has been offered, but rejected. Our friend isn't going to wear it. But the king, our host, substory, God, is able to see the unseen. The host of this wedding saw a man, one who professes faith, but's not a true believer, a person without faith. To accept the invitation and then show up to the wedding feast in your own coverings is an act of rebellion that did not go unnoticed by the father of the groom. One might think of a garment as a simple way to cover oneself in modesty or in showy finery before going to a fancy party. But the robe's significance is much deeper for members who have received the gift of the garment, because it reminds them of their deeper connection to their host, to God, their commitment to follow his expectations and the blessings and inclusion it promises. And when I hear about this garment, it puts me in mind of Jesus' seamless robe. That seamless burial cloth is often taken to symbolize the unity of the church, in the same way that tearing a garment by a prophet like John the Baptist was seen as a sign of disunity, the rending of the curtain, the breaking of our universal commitment to be together. A literal tearing of fabric that figuratively covers and protects us. Allegory. So a person not dressed in wedding clothes, substory, in God's salvation, is just dressed in his own works, in his own importance. An act of willingly not being included. And the man without the wedding garment represents the groups who will be excluded from that eschatological feast. I like that word. It's the final destiny of our souls, that great wedding feast. The ones who are excluded are the ones who reject the invitation, and the ones who accept it but don't prove worthy because they don't have true faith. And it's a free gift. I like that image that God is a gentleman, never pushy. The offer is always there. God highly desires that we accept it, but it won't be forced upon us. So it turns out the only ones who are excluded, those who are bound hand and foot and thrown into the darkness, are those who exclude themselves. The wedding feast is not provided for the attendees according to what they deserve, but according to the wealth and graciousness of the host. Fortunately for us, the invitation to join the banquet is offered more than once.